I am a 17-year-old boy who lives alone with his mother. My mother is a doctor and often has to work late at night, so I spend most of the day at home alone. I'm already very used to all this because when I'm doing schoolwork, sometimes I play on PlayStation and sometimes I have friends over. But once, about a week ago, something happened that scared me so much that I developed a phobia of being alone at home. In the evening, my mother texted me that a surgical patient was urgently brought to the clinic with multiple injuries and she wouldn't be able to come home that day. I wasn't angry about that. On the contrary, I was happy because I thought that at night I would turn on the TV loudly and watch some movie until late, so I wrote to my mother that everything would be fine and she should not worry. In her last text, she told me that I was already a big boy and didn't need to be warned to lock the door at night, not to open it for strangers, and to turn off the gas in the kitchen before bed. I went to the store and bought a lot of chips and various snacks to get me through the night. I even texted my best friend to come over to watch a movie with me, but she said she had a lot to do tomorrow and had to go to bed early. Okay, I had to watch the movie alone, and because of that, I had to try not to pick a horror movie because those kinds of movies have a bad effect on me at night. When I returned home, it was already evening, and it was already dark outside, so after changing my clothes, I connected the TV and laptop to each other via HDMI and turned on the new Marvel movie. The movie lasted for 3 hours. It was quite interesting, although I have to admit, the old Marvel movies were much better. After finishing this big movie, I found that I didn't have any snacks left at all, and I didn't really like watching anything without them. I couldn't even go to the market. It was already 12 o'clock at night, and all the supermarkets near my house were already closed for a long time. What should I do? I already felt a little tired, and I was too lazy to start a new movie, so I decided to just go to bed. As my mother told me, first I turned off the gas. Then I locked the door and went to my bedroom. I usually close my bedroom door every night before I go to bed because I don't want my mom to come in when I'm listening to music or doing something else because it scares me for a second. However, today I was completely alone at home and decided not to lock the door. I lay down in bed, covered myself with a blanket, and closed my eyes. I tried to sleep, but some strange feeling did not let me rest. Hell, I was so used to locking my bedroom door that I couldn't sleep without it. After a few minutes of hesitation, I finally got out of bed and ran barefoot to the door to close it. After locking the door, I went back to bed and lay down. I felt very calm now, so I closed my eyes and started thinking about pleasant memories. I fell asleep in about 15 minutes. When the clock struck 3 in the morning, I was awakened by the sound of a lark breaking in the living room. My apartment is located in a newly built building, so the walls are very thin and you can often hear all the sounds in the house. The sound of footsteps followed the smashing of the lark. Having just woken up, at first I thought that my mom had returned home and accidentally hit the table, dropping the vase. But when I listened more carefully to the sound of footsteps, I realized that this voice belonged to a man. He walked back and forth and did not stop. Step by step, I could hear how he moved the furniture. I was very scared. The only thing I wanted was to pick up the phone and call my mother. That way I would know if it was she who was in my house or not. However, my phone was far from the bed, placed on the charger, and now it would be dangerous to get up and take it because my steps might draw the stranger's attention. That's why I covered the blanket up to my nose and stared at the closed door with wide open eyes. Soon I felt that the stranger began to advance towards my room with his heavy steps. He stopped at my door and stood motionless for several seconds. I could hear the heavy breathing sound he was making. Then the stranger took hold of the round knob of my door and tried to turn it, probably hoping to open it, but thank God it was locked. He was pressing the door handle for a long time, very aggressively. For a second I thought that he would break it soon, so I held the blanket tightly and felt fear in my whole body. I already started to think about how to save myself when the stranger appeared in my bedroom, but suddenly he let go of the door handle, and there was only the sound of his breathing around, which was soon replaced by the sound of his steps. I heard how the stranger moved away from my bedroom door and started towards the main exit door of the apartment. Soon, the loud banging of the iron door was heard, but my fear did not disappear for several minutes. I lay with my eyes open all night, constantly thinking that the stranger would come back and try to enter my room. When it dawned, my mom came home. She was angry about the broken lark because she thought I had broken it and she loved it very much. I didn't say anything to her. I didn't want her to worry. Thank God I got out of bed that night and locked the bedroom door. If I hadn't done that, no one knows how that night would have ended. As it turned out, I moved to live alone. When my classmates and I finished high school, almost all found jobs and moved independently from their parents. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it, maybe because I was lazy or I didn't look for a job well enough, but the fact that I was still unemployed and living with my parents, unlike my friends, really hurt my self-esteem. Besides, what can I hide from you? Financial problems have always followed me. I kept hearing from people older than me how stressed they were about bank bills, monthly utilities, and the worthless insurance you had to pay if you had a car. In short, I finally started working in my second year of college. Unfortunately, I hadn't found anything with my major yet, but I started working in a renovation company where I was responsible for painting walls. I didn't expect it at first. Although I had a pretty good income from this job, I could afford to rent a small, modest apartment and finally start an independent life. I rented an apartment a little further from downtown, in the area where the apartments were the cheapest, although at this point I already had a car and it was not a big problem. And the repair locations of my work were mostly in the suburbs. When I was driving my car to the new apartment, I was a little worried. I was afraid that the apartment would not be as it appeared in the photos. Besides, I paid the owner the whole month's rent in advance, and before I made a decision, he also told me that the money I paid would not be returned. In about half an hour, I reached the 9-story building where my apartment was located. The building was an old building. It looked terrible from the outside, but I still did not give up hope and thought positively that the apartment itself would be better. The house's owner did not meet me at home. He warned me that he would leave the key under the carpet at the entrance. I took the key, opened the door, and entered the apartment. At that time, I finally lost hope, because the apartment looked terrible. The parquet floor was torn, the wallpaper was torn from the walls, and the main lamp in the entrance was burned out. What can I do? I shouldn't have hoped for a better apartment at this price, I said to myself, and entered the bedroom with my luggage. I spent the next few hours sorting everything out and arranging the clothes on the shelves of the wardrobe. By the time I finished my work, it was getting late, and I felt a little tired, so I decided to make Turkish black coffee and wake myself up a bit. I was lucky that the owner of the house had left some coffee and a kettle in the kitchen. However, the coffee tasted very bad. I almost lost my heart. I had the feeling that it was very old, that's why I didn't finish drinking it and just turned it over. I was so tired that I didn't want to go out and explore the neighborhood. I was going to go grocery shopping at the supermarket tomorrow, so I decided to just lay in bed and sleep. Damn. The bed linen also smelled terrible. It felt like it hadn't been washed in 3 years, so I didn't take my clothes off, thinking that by leaving them on, I would ensure myself that I wouldn't catch any disease. To my surprise, I soon fell asleep, which I did not expect because of the terrible smell and thirst, but at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was awakened by a terrible sound coming from the ceiling. The sound sounded like the upstairs neighbor walking back and forth with very heavy and rough steps. They didn't stop. Several minutes passed, but the upstairs neighbor walked with heavy steps. Soon the footsteps were joined by the loud sound of the door opening and closing, and I was very angry because I had to wake up very early in the morning and go to work. I waited a few more minutes. I thought it would calm down, but the sound got louder and louder as time went by, so I got up from my bed, put on my shoes, and angrily went upstairs to ask my neighbor to be quiet. I knocked loudly on their door for 2 minutes, although it was obvious that no one was going to open the door, and the sound of footsteps from inside did not stop. Angry, I decided to go back to my house and call the police. When I went down to my floor, I also heard a sound from my next-door neighbor's apartment. It sounded like a conversation, but later I realized that it was the loud sound of the TV, although in the background I heard the sound of a middle-aged man laughing, which sounded very real. I did not pay much attention to them because the sound of the doorbell did not enter my bedroom. Only the sound of the upstairs neighbor disturbed me so much that it did not allow me to sleep. As soon as I entered my apartment, I immediately picked up the phone to call the police. A young woman answered the phone, who was the dispatcher of the police number. I explained the current situation to her and finally told her my address. It was very surprising that she was surprised after giving her the address and asked me to repeat it. I repeated the address, and she fell silent for half a minute, as if she had swallowed her tongue and could no longer utter her voice. "Excuse me. Do you understand me?" I asked, although I hadn't heard her voice for some time. "Excuse me. Is anyone here?" I repeated, and only after that the dispatcher spoke. "Sorry, I think it's a mistake." "What do you mean?" I asked. "You know, the building you named has been abandoned for many years and no one lives there." The dispatcher told me, and my whole body was taken by a single wave. "Mister, can you hear me?" she asked me after she informed me that I couldn't talk anymore. "Perhaps you named a completely different building. Could you please confirm your address?" she repeated, although I could not raise my voice for some time. Please send someone, please hurry," I told her, scared. And after the dispatcher confirmed everything, she asked me not to hang up the phone until the police arrived. All this time, she was trying to calm me down and help me not to panic, while the footsteps from upstairs continued to grow louder and louder until 2 police officers arrived. Only then did all the sounds in the entire building stop. The police officers immediately took me out of this ugly building and took me to the car. One of them had a pistol in his hand and was checking the apartments from where I could hear footsteps or even the TV, but they didn't see anyone or anything there. They immediately took me from the scene of the accident and took me to the department to interrogate me and tell me everything about the client. I later learned that the building I was renting was abandoned about 5 years ago due to a big fire, and after the entire building was declared a disaster, everyone was banned from living there. The policeman also told me that several people did not survive the fire and were burned alive. To this day, no one can explain the mystique of this building, although many young people who sneaked into this building and spent the night inside just like that disappeared without a trace. Thank God that the police officers came in time and quickly got me out of that damn place. Who knows what would have happened if I had just continued to sleep and not called the police? I would probably be as lost as the young men who entered this building before me.